Well, good evening, Patriots. This is Christine Cisneros, and I'm so pleased to be with you. I'm once again on a Sunday night in front of my fireplace, and I'm so grateful for the firewood we gathered last summer and the beautiful Gregorian chants being played on King FM here in Seattle, Washington. And I am so grateful to be here with you. This has been a stupendous week. It truly has. I know that there is quite a bit of anxiety and tension and perhaps even some resignation about what is going to be happening with our president and the country. However, I am so pleased that at the same time, this is our moment to take God up on the invitation that he so eloquently and gracefully has placed before us to cooperate and to be in calibration in creating the miracle and the miracles that are to happen in the unfolding weeks to come. The name of our piece this week is Optimal. And I say that because there are so many things that have been shown to me this last year that I could never have planned out, thought about, worked it out in my mind, and had it come at the most perfect time. Divine timing, God's own divine timing, is something that none of us will ever figure out. And yet, when it happens, it's unmistakable, and it truly is stunning. There's a part in Treasure Island where there's the discovery that one is not alone. And I think that as we move into this time period where everything seems to be falling apart, dreams seem to be quashed, and the human spirit is indeed, at least to some degree, feeling as though there will be irreparable demoralization. However, in this time, what I have seen in the past year and what I see now amplified so much so is the opportunity, the chance for us to really see the depth of the corruption and the height of the corruption and the width of the corruption that has occurred in our country. We often talk about the deep state as if it's just about politics or even some global elite somewhere in some faraway land. But what I'm seeing is that the deep state and all that it embodies, all of the attitudes, the presumptions, the assumptions, the weakening of the human spirit, the attempt to at least, and the attempted steal, not just of the election, but what the election represents, which is the liberty in our country to have a voice on so many levels, which is your basic human right, but to actually have a country that helps to protect that, not only in the realm of voting for who you want to represent your country, to fight for the protection of these liberties that our freedoms are enacted through, but the actual clearing to create something that one is both proud of and can see that it will assist and create harmony, joy, and peace for others as well. This is a liberty that is not often spoken about, especially at a time like this, because there are so many bigger fish to fry, so to speak. And yet what it comes down to eventually is that if you do not have the liberty to express your freedom through, if you do not have a clearing through which to meet others who are working to do that very thing, and if you are not protected as you go to create that, then one must ask oneself, what is all of this for? What will we do with all of the furniture but no house to put it in? There has been, I think, a misconception or an idea that the behavior, the ethics or lack thereof, and the wherewithal of the deep state and also of the cabal and all that is involved, all the minions and the higher ups and the upper echelons, that all of this is kind of each one is a separate faction, and they're not. They're all conjoined. And the way that they are predominantly conjoined is in the battle for your personal sovereignty, to take it away, at least to the degree of your experiencing it, and to convince the population that not only does it not exist, really, it's a fantasy, your personal sovereignty, but that you should never even have the desire. You should not be asking for it. You should not be talking about it. And as time goes on, just as in several dystopic novels, the murmurings about freedom or liberty are often initially viewed as distasteful, leading to an illness that you might have if you think these things, if you think about your personal liberties and your freedoms, eventually becoming something that is absolutely criminal to be thinking about or talking about, let alone talking about and communicating with others about. And so, as we see in the Word where it says that where two or more are gathered, there the Holy Spirit shows up. And what we can always know is that we are always two or more, because it's ourselves and God. Which leads me to another thought that I've had this week. And this isn't a new thought, but the fact of the matter is that when we come to the alignment of who we are with our purpose on the planet, we then discover that we are not alone here, that we actually are in company of those who may not have the exact same path, how could they, but who have a very clear idea and notion about what personal sovereignty is. And it seems most of the time that's also because of the obscuring of the personal sovereignty in one's life and in others' lives. And that might be something that is actually a bond that is felt when one discovers how fervently another is looking and pursuing their purpose in this world that is at times excruciating. It seems to me that what joins us, we ourselves, to that which we were created out of, when we find the deeper experience of that as we move along, it can be an epiphany and it can be brilliant. And also, I think that what happens is when we find people that are sharing this unobscuring of their own light and their connection with the divine, it is something to behold, and it is also something through which we may build a true bond out of, and a legacy or legacies that will persevere and press on into the future to support others who are working from this premise. I have talked before about the difference between joy and peace, and I think there is a very distinct difference, particularly when you consider that joy may actually fall sometimes into self-gratification, and peace is actually something that, even if you're extremely uncomfortable, even unto the point of almost death, that you may have a very good sense of peace about your travels, your journey, and your fulfilled purpose on the planet. What I find spectacular is when you actually have joy and peace together. This is a great recipe. And it's actually scientifically proven that if you are under extreme duress, anxiety, fear, fight, flight, or freeze, that you actually cannot scientifically reach that part of your brain that is creative. And so if you have an experience, a moment, or even a series of moments wherein joy and peace are together, there is no more fertile ground through which to implement your love and to create something that embodies truly the divine. A friend asked me this week why I thought that people do not value our country, why they're, if we could just get them to value the country. And I think that is something that would be good to see. However, You cannot force people to value something, but what you can do is be ever vigilant about that which you value and protect it and model that protection as you walk through the world. Because of things that we all know about in the realm of history being obscured, bold-faced lies being told about our history, things being omitted, things being hole punched out, whether it's in the Bible, the history books, and particularly the mainstream media and local news that we thought we could count on. What we are finding is that there are so many people confused about what to value, simply because everything that they thought was so is now being turned upside down. And so because there was such an obscuring, because there was such of an eradication of what their perspective was on their liberties and the freedom and our country and what was done for them, we are now facing a time when some people are learning for the first time what actually our country, our world, and those who desire to have the dream of our ancestors, which is the United States of America. I'm also reminded of a scene in Braveheart, wherein the first battle with the English troops and some of the Irish conscripts, there was such an air of doubt amongst the Scottish people and how they were going to fight the most powerful military on the planet, especially given that they had been beaten down for so many decades, and had been told that these were the rules and this is what we'll abide by and we need to work together. And if you just pay attention a little more and understand your place, then you will be left alone to live peacefully, which was never true. It was just another way to get another foothold in by the English in order to subjugate, control, and ultimately commit a very rudimentary form of genocide on the Scottish people. And so when the first battle was going to be waged under the direction of William Wallace and the English and the Irish conscripts by order of the king, what you find in that moment is that these Scottish citizens who were so wanting to have their liberty and their freedom enacted through their liberties, that they showed up on the battlefield, but quickly became very scared and terrified, actually, because they knew that the English army was huge and they were not. And so there was the famous rousing of the troops, so to speak, the farmers and those who showed up on the field, by asking the questions about what will you do without freedom? What will you do without freedom? There's nothing that one can do, because it all will eventually end up being tyranny, prisonership, death, and recycling of yourself into some form that you would not want that to happen to you or your family. When the English began their charge with horses and planks and weapons of various kinds towards the Scots had actually created spears that were very, very long, maybe 15, 20 feet long, very sharp at the ends, but they hid them. They were on the ground, and the English had no idea. And so as the English approached, William Wallace was very emphatic about not lifting up the spears until absolutely the right moment, which was at the point where the English could not go right or left to avoid sure death through these spears. And it seems to me that one of the biggest challenges was to trust not even William Wallace, but to trust the divine in what they were doing there that day. And so under the direction of William Wallace, they held the line until the absolute moment, which was undeniable and sure death for the English as they charged in. And they then lifted the spears at the moment that was absolutely perfect. No sooner, no later. And what happened after that was the long road and the unraveling of the English lords and the lands that were taken over by them, and all of the ideas, even on the Scottish side, about who was to be the leader when, in fact, the country had not yet even been secured. Does that sound familiar? It sounds exactly like today, with our president and those who are squabbling over control and what they think is power, and so spoiled and so entitled that they count on the fact that we are people that have forgotten our personal sovereignty, forgotten that there are spears on the ground, and have forgotten that we are no longer under this confusion, this cloud of confusion about mistaking comfort for security and freedom for free stuff, and also not mistaking who we are for what they call us. These ways in which the direction that we are going, because we know that this is the direction we must go to preserve the liberties in our country and to create a way for the clearing in the future for those who will continue this work. We may find ourselves tempted to look around us and say, well, why are they doing that and getting away with it? Why haven't there been arrests? Why don't we see this perp walk happening? Why don't we get this? Why don't we get that? When in fact, these moments are so precious and so few at this point in history, though it feels like it's long and drawn out, it actually is going to be very quick when we look back decades from now and talk about these things and tell the stories, the personal stories of each of us as we move through this time in history. We will have decades and centuries to talk about this. What we won't have are the precious few moments right now where we must be paying 100% attention so that we may lift these spears at the absolute perfect moment. We must remember that being a second-class citizen or a second-class human on this planet is first-class communism, tyranny, and death, for certain. We must keep that securely in our mind, not to frighten ourselves and be terrified, although we might get frightened. We might get terrified. We must keep these squarely in our mind because we know what we're fighting for. We know what we're fighting for because we know that there is no other place to go in this world than the United States of America. And if the United States of America and everything that every other country has fought for, sought out, sent people to, sacrificed for, and everyone that is sacrificed in this country to make it what it is, there will be no other place to go. We will have no other place in the world to go. And so our mental equivalence must come up to these moments and this level of understanding what this battle truly is about. It doesn't matter what direction they are going. Those who are not able to understand how to value our country, and those who understand what our country is about and don't value it to the point of protecting the people within it. We must just keep going forward. We must press forward, no matter what we see. Because this idea of that we have to trust this person or that person, our president has forged and trailblazed something that has never been done in American history. And yet what we must remember is that our president trusts God, and so must we. This will assist us in staving off the fantasies of perfection and what we think should happen and how it should happen and when it should happen. No doubt, just like that first battle against the English, there were so many Scots that died that day as well. And yet, their fight was not in vain, and their deaths were not in vain. And though we know that Scotland, of course, fought for and won its independence from England, what we know is that that moment, as large, as spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally, politically, economically, panoramic as it was, it is so small in comparison to what is happening right now. And that is because all of the wars, all of the battles, all of the struggles, and all of the deaths and tears and families that mourn those who fought have led us to this moment where we are not fighting for a country only. We are not fighting for a demographic only. We are not fighting for religious freedom only. We are fighting indeed for humanity and all of the personal sovereignty that we were given And all of the attempts and the war is on those who have attempted to convince the population, to convince humanity itself, that not only do we not have a right to it, but that even reaching for it is indeed a life filled with futility, despair, and death. So many would like to convince us that this is a terrible time, that 2020 was a horrible year, and that nothing good came out of it, and that if only we could get back to being comfortable, we'd be fine. And though I do not wish hardship on you, Patriot, nor myself, nor any of the families connected to us, what I can say is that hardship indeed is here, and we must learn from it, and we must find out our mettle, what we are made of, because now is the most perfect moment in all of divine timing and history for us to create in the shadow of that which is the depth of ugliness and corruption all the way up to the office of vice presidency and into the land where each of us lives. Take a moment, remember who you are, and listen for the absolute right moment to raise the spear and do away with this evil, so that we can get on with the business of actually creating that which is optimal.